So I think one of the more interesting stories and one of the more interesting mysteries in all of Batman is the Long Halloween, and specifically with the Long Halloween, the complexity of the holiday killer. So I just wanted to go through all of the possible theories. So starting with the obvious killer from an outside perspective on the story, what we know was later admitted is Gilda Dent. And even before getting the reveal of her being the holiday killer, in the comics you have her doing more of a monologue even though no one else is with her in this scene. And that's where we find her burning the hat, gun, and holiday coat. But really, I think what makes this pretty complicated is in the animated movie, it's not really as clear as to how many killings she did, but we know from her excerpt in the comics that it was just those first 3 killings, so we know that someone else would have likely had to continue it after her. We have her assuming that that was Harvey Dent, but looking at the other pieces of the story, it doesn't look like it's nearly as simple as that. And that would lead us to the next suspect, which is also probably the other common known holiday killer in this instance, Alberto Falcone. And this is initially who Batman thinks the holiday killer is. But he wasn't the original holiday killer. It's most likely that he just adopted the persona. This was really just a perfect means to make hits on the Maroni family. And you also have the likely ambition of him finally getting credit from his father, since he was seen as more of the weak offspring, even though he was extremely intelligent. I do think it is a little bit confusing. You do have him faking his death in the comics, and we likely have him also being a victim of the holiday killer. So not only did he hire someone to kill him as the holiday killer, but after his public death, he was able to then continue as the new holiday killer. And then in addition to the Maroni family, he also covers his tracks by killing anyone that would have known about him. This was originally the man who helped him fake his death, in addition to the gunsman and also his aunt for looking into his death. So most likely, I think he would have been the next culprit to continue here, and this was really who Gilda thought Harvey was in terms of the new holiday killer. But I think what is really confusing here is whether or not Alberto was the second holiday killer in the animated movie, because it does look like he actually died in this, although we don't get any sort of confirmation. It's possible they were saving that for a sequel or something like that. But if he did actually die in that case, I think obviously you would have had maybe someone else being the second killer in the animated movie, unless every act was done by Gilda. But there's still a lot of loose ends depending on what version you're looking at here. And that would lead us into our next known holiday killer. I think it's more ironic than it is true, but you have Harvey Dent being the third one here. And this is also someone Batman really reluctantly thought was the holiday killer just due to the different victims. But really, it looks like Harvey didn't have any involvement in either story, but his real act as the holiday killer was killing Carmine Falcone in the end. But I wouldn't really say that's the same thing as the real holiday killer. But one of the interesting aspects of this here is you do have 2 bullets being associated with each murder. So it's possible that was something that was supposed to be symbolic of him as Two-Face, but he didn't have that identity in terms of getting the chemical thrown on him in the courtroom. All of that happened after a lot of the holiday killings, so I don't think it would have made sense for him to adopt that persona yet. But I think it is an interesting piece in terms of those 2 bullets per victim. And the other strange thing was that you have that part of Gilda finding his hair being wet when he came home late one night. And this was really why she suspected he was the holiday killer. and it's not entirely clear as to why exactly his hair was wet and why his initial explanation to his wife didn't really match up, but I think that's probably just more of a coincidence than evidence of him being the holiday killer in this. And I would also say, in terms of especially the animated movie, the yacht scene where we see Alberto getting killed, the holiday killer looks a lot more like Harvey Dent than it does Gilda Dent. I would also say this is somewhat true, but not as true for the comics, because we don't really get as clear of a look on the killer in the artwork. But for the animated movie, I just really don't think that the killer looks like Gilda at all, unless that was, again, someone that Alberto hired to fake his death, or if that was someone that Gilda hired. But that's definitely something to note here. And also, since we do know that the gun was found in the basement, even though we likely know that was due to Gilda, it is possible that that could have been from Harvey too. And you do have Harvey telling Batman that he believes it was both him and Alberto in the end, but that more than likely was actually Harvey just trying to take the fall from his wife. So I don't really think we have too much from Harvey, but there are some pieces that do need to be considered there. And then I would go to the next suspect, and this is getting a little bit more unlikely, I would say, but it is still relevant to note here. But I have Carmine Falcone. And I think while his real involvement here doesn't make sense due to a lot of the evidence we get after the fact, just looking at the killings and the motives behind the killings, I do think Carmine is a good match here. We do know that Johnny Viti, even though he was his nephew, was going to rat and was going to be an informant to both Harvey Dent and the Gotham City Police Department to really bring down Carmine and the Falcone family. And we also know that it was really the wedding that Carmine threw in his favor was just really to buy out his nephew and to get rid of any chance of him testifying against him. So it is possible that he wasn't entirely sure that that was going to work, or maybe they had some doubts after the wedding, and that's really why they wanted to get Johnny Viti out of the way. And then in terms of the Irish gang on Thanksgiving following the first Halloween killing, or the other gang in the animated movie, it's very likely that since the gang did get arrested by the police, it is possible, even though they were pretty much extremely loyal in terms of not talking to the police about their involvement with the Falcone family, it is possible that he was suspicious of whether or not they did give any sort of information to the police. So whether he was worried about them going back to the police or already admitting to something, it's possible that that's why he got them out of the way and that was his target for the second killing here. But really the only reason that this wouldn't add up is you do have Carmine's bodyguard being the victim on Christmas. And this is something that Batman directly states put Carmine out of the equation here. And really, to give an argument in favor of this being Carmine, it is possible that he did want to kill one of his own to just really throw everyone off in terms of the police and anyone doing any sort of detective work in this. Having Johnny Viti initially get killed in addition to his bodyguard could have just been something that he did just to be a little bit more unpredictable and just to erase any sort of pattern that was forming around the victims here. On New Year's, you have the death of Alberto, or Alberto faking his death. And I would say in terms of this, that wouldn't really make sense in terms of Carmine being involved either. But I would say maybe Carmine wasn't the holiday killer directly, but he ordered a lot of the hits. And whether it was him working with Alberto directly or just other hitmen to do a lot of these killings. And all of these steps really gave him the ability to then target a lot of the Maroni men, in addition to Luigi Maroni, or the father of Sal Maroni. And then anyone else was just to really cover the tracks. But the only problem with this is also his sister, Carla Viti, getting murdered on his birthday. That probably also wouldn't make sense. It's possible because she was getting suspicious of Alberto that's why he wanted her out of the equation, or if he was worried about her making a move towards taking over the family. That was just the opportunity that he decided to go with there. So I would say that those are really the big 4 names in terms of the possible killings and then what we really do know as to what happened. But you do also have to consider Carla Viti, even though she was also a victim of this. Since we do know there was likely multiple holiday killers here, it's possible she was also involved. We initially have Batman and the conversation between him and Gordon and Dent being suspicious, and considering the fact that maybe she did kill her son initially to try and make a move to take the family over, because that is something that is explained in the details of the plot. And we also know that she was running the Chicago side of the family business, so she definitely would have been capable to make a move to take over the family, but I think that's really unlikely here, especially with her being a real victim. And then really, besides the Joker and the Riddler, Calendar Man, which I think is an interesting piece here, since the holiday killings as a theme are a lot more relevant to him, and you do have his interrogation scenes in Arkham, I think you do have to consider his involvement one way or another. And we do have Batman hinting at this, saying that it's definitely possible that he could have faked the dates or the records on the prison logs in order to escape the nights of the murders, and then he was just able to make his way back in and would stay in prison, because he really does seem like he knows a lot more than he lets on, and almost really has fun kind of poking at Batman and Gordon coming to visit him in prison. So maybe he was just really intelligent and was able to put a lot of the details together on the killer. But it's possible whether he was the holiday killer or just had a hand in it somehow. But I would say that was extremely unlikely. And then the most likely event that we know happened was that there was a combination of killers, most likely Alberto and Gilda in the comics. But in the animated movie, I think it's a lot more unclear in terms of who did the later killings. It's possible that it was actually Harvey Dent in the animated movie. It's possible that Carmine and the mob kind of picked up where she left off, or Gilda did all of the killings there. I really would say, though, that it doesn't make sense in terms of the animated movie why Gilda would then go to target the Maroni family. Maybe this was really just a strategic move to cause a gang war between the Maronis and the Falcones, and then in the end the Falcones would be weakened severely, and that was really her overall motive. But I would say that's a lot more open-ended, and it's a lot harder to say what happened there. But overall, I think it is interesting that you do have a lot of bits of information that could really apply loosely to a lot of different people here. And I think while they are subtle, I do like the animated movie's ending just a little bit better, because I think it is interesting having Batman in there instead of Gilda kind of just talking to herself. And I think it is interesting that Batman does let her go, since he does believe that the holiday killings are over. So I think the Long Halloween has a lot of interesting mysteries that it uncovers, and I think it is a pretty interesting story overall. And I think the holiday killer is really an interesting concept because it kind of adopts a few different identities and is still somewhat of a mystery as to what exactly happened. I think it is more of a Agatha Christie style in terms of the original story, and I think that really creates a lot of interest with Batman and Detective Comics. Feel free to let me know what you thought happened. Really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you later.